Here we go. Roll video.
I think anybody creating something new must have an adventure.
It's not cinema, it's something else.
My advice to a young filmmaker is to make a movie every week.
The whole bag of movies can be learned in about a day and a half.
But suspense is essentially an emotional process.
You gotta make films. You gotta make it and get it seen.
Cinema for me is a world of when I dream.
Welcome, everybody, to Behind the Slate. I am your host, Aaron Strand. My guest today is one of the world's most influential people with a camera. Andrew Callahan is a journalist and filmmaker. After achieving viral success for his hitchhike zine turned video series, All Gas, No Brakes, which essentially created the modern man-on-the-street style internet interview, he directed the documentary film This Place Rules about the 2020 U.S. presidential election and the January 6th attack on the Capitol, which was released by HBO Max and A24. In 2021, he launched Channel 5 News on YouTube, where he and a team of independent journalists bring on-the-ground news coverage on everything from the war in Gaza to the LA fires, to the inhabitants of the Las Vegas underground tunnels, to Miami Beach spring break. And this year, Andrew independently released his second full-length independent documentary, Dear Kelly, where he explores the life of an eccentric, middle-aged ex-lawyer turned red-pilled conspiracy theorist and the attempts of his family to rehabilitate him. After road showing a rough cut of the film last year, Dear Kelly premiered on its own website earlier this month. The film made a staggering $100,000 in rentals on opening weekend and had over 30,000 downloads in its opening week, which makes it the most successful direct-to-consumer documentary since Coney 2012. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, man, thank you for the fantastic summary. I've been asked to describe my work before, and I've never really been able to do it that concisely and make myself sound that cool. So shout out to you. I'm probably going to have to steal that exact summary from you for my biography, or if I make a website in the future.
Yes, I'll send you the bio for sure. Let me just start off by saying, man, I loved this movie. I think it's an incredible accomplishment, and that handles such sensitive material with intelligence and compassion. And it achieves something which I'm kind of like beginning to think is like the true marker of great art, in that it is both a specific snapshot of a certain moment in time, while also telling a universal story, a portrait of the human experience. Were you thinking about this dynamic between sort of specificity and universality while you developed the film?
Yeah, because especially after, making This Place Rules and documenting sort of these macro events for a long time, where I'd go to events that were high energy, but I'd speak to each person in their most frantic state for about maybe 30 seconds each, and it would kind of create a chaotic compilation of these individuals. I felt like that wasn't really creating the relatability, you know what I mean, that I'm sure that I ended up achieving with Dear Kelly. Like, it was showing people how crazy things were, but it wasn't presenting a model for empathy and understanding and connection in the future, because everyone has a dad. A lot of people have, parents who have more or less been ideologically consumed by politics or something like that. So I wanted to make something relatable and that you could watch later in time and also learn a little bit about what was going on in this strange 2020 to 2024 period.
Yeah, that you kind of bring up, you touch upon something that I'm so fascinated by in your work, which is the evolution of your presence and sort of like the commitment to the truth and that humanistic experience, like over the last 5-6 years, however long you've been producing videos, like since Quarter Confessions.
Right.
And I feel like it's this evolution of like you've gone from the sort of like comedic role of like the straight man, and also in terms of the subject matter, to this like really, in this film, you like get involved with your subject. You take gonzo journalism to another level, but you're also contextualizing it with truth. I mean, how have you sort of navigated that evolution as a personality within the videos that you're making?
Yeah, I mean, backing up a bit, if I was to look back at Dear Kelly and do it again, I don't know if I would go as far as I did. Not so much with searching for Bill Joyner, but by the end of the film, off screen, I was very emotionally invested in the outcome of the intervention and rehab process, to the point that probably I shouldn't, I was prioritizing the Kelly story over my own life to a certain extent, because I had invested so much time into this documentary. So, I mean, if you think about the first first scene being filmed on April 11th, 2021, and the final scene being filmed 4.5 weeks ago with Uncle Pill at a skate park in San Diego, there's a big a gap in time there during which I actually grew up a lot too. Like some of the stuff that I filmed back in 2021, like the Planned Parenthood raid, the ghillie suit stakeout of Bill Joyner's house, I probably wouldn't do that today just because I've evolved as a journalist and as a creator. Like I feel more responsibility to seek truth in the very first moments as opposed to just show comedic scenes. You know what I mean? So I grew a lot. But now I think that somewhere in the middle, I really thought that I had it figured out, and you kind of see this youthful, utopian outlook of like, I'm going to fix this situation. I've analyzed the factors that led to this, and I'm going to use my knowledge and apply it to this documentary subject and make everything work out in the end. And it ends up with this sort of bittersweet moment at the end where I'm like, I tried my best. And I think that is growing up. Like if I was to look at, the mind of a 22-year-old versus now a 27-year-old, I think it's a pretty significant gap in time, especially with brain development as to like, listen, man, we're all getting older. The world's not going to be fixed anytime soon. You should try your best, but if you don't get the results you expected, you just have to accept that and move forward.
But it's kind of incredible because in some ways, like, Kelly sort of for so much of the film, he's the protagonist. We're invested in his story and his story arc. But at a certain point toward the end in that intervention scene, in some ways you kind of take that mantle. You're the one who's undergoing the biggest change. And even though you may do it differently today, the effect was still incredibly powerful within the film. I mean, I got teary-eyed during that scene.
Yeah, thanks, man. I talked to one of my journalism idols the other day, Louis Theroux from the UK, because I sent him the link to the film, and his feedback to me, he was like, "Wow." He said that he doesn't think that Kelly would have gone to rehab if I wasn't reading a letter at the intervention scene. You know what I mean? Because, his family obviously is emotionally tethered to him in general because that's their dad. But I think that for me, having spent probably more time with him than they did over the course of those 4 years, being able to, relate my own experience to his and giving him the chance to turn over a new leaf, I think really sprung him into action. However, another theory is that he may not have gone to treatment if there was no cameras.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you think about the heroic narrative, the heroic self-narrative that, allowed me to film him in the first place for 4 years without him even questioning where the footage was going, just the idea of himself as the main character, the heroic protagonist in a documentary film, I think there being 6 cameras around maybe made him feel like if he didn't agree to the terms of the intervention, then he might look like a bad guy.
Wow. Reflecting on that theory, kind of how do you feel sort of as the journalist in charge of those cameras?
I mean, I don't know if I'd do an intervention again. The thing about it wasn't actually my idea. It was the family's idea. They just
Wow.
thought that because I'd been so close to Kelly for that long period of time that, I was the only guy that would be able to do it or convince him to attend something like that. I mean, it makes me feel a little bit better because the intervention wasn't a surprise. On the actual intervention TV show, they think they're just coming over to like grab a coffee or something, and their whole family's there with letters ready. I told them I wanted to do a filmed family mediation where they're going to present, how they felt the past couple of years. I didn't use the word intervention, but I feel like interventions in general are a very controversial thing. I didn't realize that until after the film came out. A lot of people are against the idea of interventions. They think it's like too much pressure. I felt like it was a good chance for people to speak their mind, even if it, worked or didn't work. I think that Kelly obviously is a very different guy at the end of the film than he was at the first. He's obviously still conservative leaning, but he's more calm and he's more, he feels more present, even if he's still down the rabbit hole, as you might say.
Yeah. Taking a step back a little bit and talking about sort of how you approached this piece as a filmmaker, at what point during this 4 years of filmmaking did you decide like, oh, this is different than like a video for YouTube, or this is bigger. This is a feature documentary.
I would say something around the intervention and just when things started to get really serious and I was filming scenes that I'd never filmed before, because I filmed a million rallies and counter protests and marches and even select character profiles about people from rallies outside their environments.
Were you very familiar with sort of the QAnon world like before This Place Rules?
Oh yeah, I mean the thing about QAnon is I'm actually not very interested in it. You know what I mean? I almost just felt like I had talked about it so much in This Place Rules, and I was so dissatisfied with the conclusion that I wanted to make this piece as like a spiritual sequel to close the loop on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, now one of the major theses of this film is what you call Andrew's radicalization theory,
Yeah.
which is that as opposed to inflammatory rhetoric and misinformation and echo chambers being the catalyst for changing a normal person into a radicalized person, it's actually a deep personal tragedy that ultimately deprives people of their core needs, which you label as security, significance, and connection. When
Yeah.
did this thesis kind of start to develop in your brain?
Well, it was interesting because, it happened because like when I first started going to conspiracy adjacent rallies like the Flat Earth Gathering in Frisco, Texas, I noticed that when I would post people, like post a video of someone doing a flat earth freestyle or talking about, Adolf Hitler being still alive and living in Antarctica beneath the ice and stuff. I'd post a video of them, and my DMs and messages and comments would say stuff like, "Hey, I went to school with this guy. Everything was normal until something fell apart, whether it was like they got fired from their job or they had a workplace accident and they got taken off a workman's comp." Like it was this very consistent theme of total core need collapse that far predated whatever, political rabbit hole they fell down. But that was all done, retrospectively. People would say, "Hey, that guy, you interviewed that guy. I knew him, but I was never able to actually get a picture of that process." And in Kelly, I saw the ultimate chance to prove that and actually scientifically track that from the genesis of core need collapse and then down the pipeline into the QAnon world.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and it's something that like a lot of other people that have really put a lot of time and study into this modern radicalization like kind of come to the same conclusions. Big fan of the QAA podcast, and that's kind
Yeah.
of like the thing that they keep coming back to is that like this is a phenomenon that's indicative of personal tragedy and sort of structural issues like in the system that is affecting
Yeah.
people. And
And because when something, bad happens to you, it's very easy to look at the world as a very dark place where there's this nebulous force of evil out there that you can't exactly put a name or a face to, but it's out there and it exists to basically sap the life force out of every hardworking American patriot and transfer your money and resources to this like deep state, right? So when you have a political movement that comes around that allows people to actually like channel that grief and vengeance into a greater movement that won't question your self narrative as long as you serve the greater cause, then you've got a perfect situation for political recruitment. Because Kelly, when he's yelling about Bill Joyner at these rallies, they don't care about what's going on there as long as he's
yeah,
supporting Trump. And,
right.
and on the other hand, many have wondered why the left and in particular, not liberals, but the left have been so difficult in mobilizing, and that's because of hyper individualism and infighting. The right wing has this collectivism where they're able to spread and unite because they're willing to set aside disagreements and transgressions as long as they serve the greater purpose. For example, at some of these Trump rallies, you have ayahuasca drinking cryptocurrency libertarians who smoke weed every day, who are next to people who are evangelical Christians who believe that marijuana was sent by the devil to cause white women to have interracial marriages. So you have these people, and they're somehow on board with each other because they both know that what they're standing for is better than the other option. Whereas in the
Yeah.
in the left, you have this idea of, oh, there's a privilege hierarchy, and the person on the bottom of that totem pole needs to be inverted and placed at the top, and you have to listen to them no matter what. And if you're not accommodating the needs of this other nebulous like force of the person without the privilege or access, then you are on the side of the oppressor. And so it becomes this weird thing where, for one, you're turning off progressive, well-intentioned people because they misspeak, and next thing you know, they're exiled. And secondly, you are just creating a language that doesn't apply to real life. Like a woman at the Revolutionary Communist March said, if the police come and start wailing on you at a protest and beating you with batons, you can't say, "Oh my gosh, I'm being triggered by this." And if you're in a courtroom and you can't say to the judge, "I feel like you're treating my black or female client improperly because of your position of privilege," you're basically training people to communicate in a language that only exists in a vacuum, and it's very depressing.
Wow, I've never heard it sort of summarized like that. I find it interesting that you talk about this film as sort of a spiritual successor to This Place Rules. I mean, you address that previous film a little bit within the documentary and a little bit of your dissatisfaction with it. Um, can you talk to me a little bit about how that your experience with that film informed how you came about on deciding on a feature length documentary, and then more importantly, the release strategy that you approached for Dear Kelly?
Well, for one, the HBO movie had such a bureaucracy behind it, and HBO wasn't even involved until the last 2 months. They picked it up at the last minute. HBO itself was really great to work with. That's the distinction I'm trying to make. Like HBO, they just took the movie when it was already basically made and said, how much did this cost to make? We're going to give you back the $1 million budget. We're going to put it out there. It's all good. The bureaucracy, there was 6 different executive producers who were all pitching in funding. You had Tim and Eric with Absolutely. You had Jonah Hill and Matt Dines with Strong Baby. You had Doing Things Media. You had My Agents. You had A24. You had so many chefs in the kitchen and only one man in the field. So I'd come back with footage, right, that they weren't in the field for, and I'd have to wait for 6 to 7 rounds of notes. Once the notes are back, if I disagree with them, that's 2 more months of creative feedback, and I'm stuck in this loop where the movie's stalled. And then after picture locking, you have to wait an entire year to get a sound mix and a color pass done. And then HBO has to put you in their marketing calendar, which takes long holidays in the summertime and the wintertime. The industry is dying to get off work. They love holidays. They hate working. It's not a labor of love for them. These are business people who hate their job like they work for, Office Depot at the C-suite. So not only is creative control out of your hands and you're bogged down by the bureaucracy, you are also being forced to go with the liberal mainstream narrative, which is strongly against leftist takes, strongly against the even empathetic psychoanalysis of people like Kelly, and is more concerned with just insulting conservatives, making them seem like they're insane. And obviously that backfired a lot this year. But also the economic thing as well. I only received 10% of residuals from the HBO project, because they say, I'm putting you on HBO. You should be grateful for the exposure. You know what I mean? This will lead you to business opportunities down the line. But what they don't tell you is that if you can release a movie independently, like I'm doing with Dear Kelly, and you get enough streams like we have done, what you can do is you can come to them and say, hey, I have the engagement, I have the streams, people like this movie, let's do a cross licensing agreement. So the goal is that we let Dear Kelly market itself for about 6 months, let it spread by word of mouth, no heavy promotion. And then we take it to Netflix, Tubi, Hulu, whatever, FX, Showtime, and we say, how would you guys like to give us a lump sum to license this film for 2 years? And then we get the rights back at the end of the day. So they can make as much money off it as they want, because it's not about money. It's about exposure at that point. And then at the end of the day, though, I'll die with ownership rights over Dear Kelly.
Yeah, I mean that's it's a pretty ingenious strategy, because you're basically doing what network TV did with their shows at the beginning of Netflix. I mean, they're licensing, The Office or whatever, to
Yeah.
Netflix as a service platform, as opposed to like a content creator platform. And you're basically taking that and putting that in the hands of you as the independent producer. Did you at what point did that strategy begin to kind of crystallize in your head?
I just thought of it. I just had conversations with my agent, Ben Schimmel from WME, and I was like, dude, have people done this? He was like, yeah, but they really don't like it. It's like one of those things where Master P did this with rap in the 90s. They tell you like, you can't do that, but you can, because it's like you can pay for as much promotion in the world as you want, right? But if your shit's dope, people are just going to come check it out. There's only so much you can artificially, promote something if the product isn't that good. And so on the reverse end of that, if there's a dope film like Dear Kelly out there, and the streaming platforms know that it would hit hard on their platform, there's going to be a bidding war for it. But you have to create that grassroots hype first, which thankfully, because of Channel 5's scope and size, is possible.
Yeah. I'm curious, you also roadshowed the film as part of your, I guess, annual sort of like live tour.
Yeah.
How has, and this is kind of like, kind of feeds into another like, Hollywood lesson that they used to know, which is, and they're kind of relearning this year, which is that like, if you promote a theatrical experience and like promote the hell out of that, you're
Yeah.
going to get increased home video numbers or streaming numbers or what have you. How did the live show, factor into this sort of promotion, your independent promotional
Yeah.
campaign? And then what's the difference between promoting your live events versus like the YouTube channel?
The purpose of the tour was to because I had over 300 hours of footage. So on each specific tour date, I showed a different cut of the film. Not
Wow.
totally different. Some scenes, like for example, when the intervention had a song the whole time, it was less impactful versus when the song dropped right before Kelly's speech. So it's little
Yeah.
micro timing like that, like when Uncle Pill's friend gets into that fist fight at Kyle's frat party. I used a Chris Brown song the first time, then I did dubstep, and then I did this kind of like Asher Roth style chill wave rap beat at the end. The chill wave rap beat worked a lot better. The audience liked it more. So what I would do on
Wow.
each of the 36 tour dates is I would sit in the crowd based upon, and I would just watch people's reactions based upon like what cut I had there. So, I mean, that's the best thing about live touring is that you get to basically use these real human beings as like a focus group for things you're trying to do. And there were some scenes they hated, so you have to have thick skin as well because you'll try shit and you can see they're yawning. So you gotta just it's great to do that.
Dude, that's so cool, man. And something that like more artists I think need to do in general. It kind of like one of the things that I'm just amazed about your work in general is like, there's an adage in sports, right? That the best ability is availability. And if anything, you are available. Like you show up where things are going down. And in this case, you're available for your film to work it like with people. I mean, where where does this come from?
The willingness to just be, I mean, I guess I just grew up in like downtown Seattle and just, I don't know, I've always just talked to people. I grew up like right in the heart of the city. So it was just kind of second nature to me. I've always just been a curious person, and I don't know, man, I just, believe it or not though, like my actual private life now, I don't really do anything. I have a girl and like a bunch of dogs and I live out in the country pretty much. Still live in LA about in like the forest. So I just chill, man, like I think when I was younger, I was more around, I'm more jaded by life now. I try to stay away from people unless I'm working. It's sad, but you just can't trust anybody.
Oh, I mean, it's well, it's interesting to hear, man, because like your work is so human centered and human focused. I mean, could it be that sort of like that initial flame is now just slightly more channeled and like protected like within
Yeah. I
the
just
videos?
I've been famous, quote unquote, since I was 20, and I haven't really been able to. It's been a blessing for various reasons. I don't have to work at Pizza Hut or Uber Eats, but I haven't really been able to experience my 20s in a normal way. Every interaction has been augmented, before my brain even got to develop. So it's not like I'm Justin Bieber, but it's very hard to form authentic friendships that aren't tainted by the inherent like desire to be around somebody who's famous. And that's just how people are, especially with social media. So, I wish people were different, but for now, I've built something so special in my opinion, it matters to me at least. And so I look at anybody who I don't know very well outside of the field as someone who could potentially fuck that up, which is sad, but it's just true.
Yeah, it's definitely understandable. At the same time, there's a quality to your work in that like okay, so if you're experiencing this in your personal life, I think it would be very easy, and you see this with many successful YouTube shows, even some shows that like have imitated your style, which
Yeah.
is that like that mentality seeps into their work. And all of a sudden the channel becomes all about their own self-promotion or just about
Yeah.
like sponsored content. And they lose any shred of like the pursuit of the truth that may have existed there in the first place.
Yeah.
Your work doesn't have that. In fact, you've doubled, tripled down. You've gone further into sort of the pursuit of the truth, at least within the work. Uh, I find that kind of incredible. Like, where does that impulse come from, and how do you stay true to that truth that you're trying to get?
Well, you have to be willing to pay with your life. And that sounds kind of crazy, but it's like, when you've been through certain situations and you know that the news media machine is against you in every single way and that they want you to become red pilled so they can run sort of like full circle smear campaign on you to make you look crazy. You just basically have to lean 10 times harder into what you're doing. Because once you're at war in general, you can either retreat or you can go 10 times harder, and that's just how it is. Maybe I wish I was born 50 years from now when there wasn't such like a corporate stranglehold on information. And, I don't understand why they don't like what I'm doing. But, like I said, I'm willing to die for it. I live for it. So there's no other way.
Wow. What do you think is going to be the future of independent film, both for you and at large? Like, do you think that this model that you're exploring is replicable?
I hope so. I mean, the thing is, like, I would like to say yeah, but at the same time, the only reason it is possible is because of the large grassroots fan base that Channel 5 has. Like, if I was a film director that was very much in the cinema world, and I was in relative obscurity when it came to like social media popularity, I would be much more dependent on the promotion of the people in the film industry. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the people who have made big breaks, made amazing documentaries like Act of Killing, those kinds of people, they weren't already famous on YouTube. You know, they had to pitch their raw product to a variety of studios and find somebody who believed in them. So, I mean, of course, I'd like to say, yeah, we don't need the studios, but a lot of people don't have the privilege of funding and attention. So I don't think that it's the future of it, but I do think that for people who are already successful, I think that it is the future of it. Self-hosted movies for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, great shout out to the Act of Killing. Joshua Oppenheimer.
He's such a fucking great movie.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
favorite.
Yeah. And have you seen the sequel?
No,
Look of Silence, or yeah, I think The Look of Silence.
that's a sick ass name though. I'll have to check it out.
Oh, dude, it's crazy. So it's crazy, dude. It's an ophthalmologist who is a victim of the genocide. He has the perpetrators of the genocide sit in his ophthalmology chair, and as he adjusts their eyesight, he basically holds their feet to the fire and are like, "Why did you do what you do?"
Damn, well, that's a pretty good point to ask somebody something, because like if someone's messing with your eyes, you're probably going to keep it real.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible, some incredible films. Will you be making feature length docs in the future?
Probably. I mean, it's not the first thing that I want to do. I want to promote Dear Kelly for a long time, and like at least for a few more months, because you know making a feature film is a lot harder than making a YouTube video. You don't really get the privilege of making mistakes, and everyone looks at everything through a microscope and looks for symbolism and plot points, and if there's loopholes, they're going to eat you alive. So I like the idea of maybe doing like the same way that I tour every like year and a half. Probably a movie every 2 years or 3 years sounds good to me.
Oh man, that I hope you do, man, because I think the work that you do is incredible, like I've said, and that increased scrutiny, I think, has you've risen to the challenge.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, like some people on Letterboxd are like, "Oh, this is just a long YouTube video," but I'm like, "Bro, that's not true, man."
No,
Like, I don't think so. Fools just
no.
look for a reason to hate and seem smart.
Yeah, and the fact that you even keep in like your signature touches, either through filming style or characters like Uncle Pill,
Yeah.
like really open the accessibility of the film to like an audience that like doesn't want to show up for some stuffy PBS documentary.
Yeah, exactly. But you're still giving them the intellectual download that they would receive from a PBS or special or a 60 minutes documentary. You know, like I always tell people, you have to. One of the goals of All Gas No Breaks, Channel 5 specifically, is to be able to transmit news media information to a millennial and Gen Z attention span, which you have to walk a fine line because you have to entertain them and then you have to give them some real information. And most of the time, especially with these new journalists on YouTube who are just making clickbait and are worse than the mainstream media, they are only catering to entertainment and outrage. And so it's that fine line where I'm like, I want to entertain you and tell you some fucking funny shit and show you a rapper like Uncle Pill, but I also want you to understand that the trauma and core need collapse that leads people to embrace conspiracy theories. But you couldn't have one without the other. You couldn't just have Pill and you couldn't just have that. But together they create a holy union.
Yeah, exactly. And it reminds me of like a line from Spielberg, like if you can make them laugh, they'll trust you to cry.
Whoa, he said that?
Yeah,
Damn. If Spielberg said that, then he's got to be right.
exactly. Exactly. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can you find the link to rent Dear Kelly?
It's as simple as www.dearkellyfilm.com. When you get there, you're going to see two options, rent and buy. You can rent for $5.55 and you can buy for life for $15.55. So if you feel like checking it out, go head on over. But if you don't, that's okay too. It's up to you.
That's awesome. We will have that link down in the show notes. You can follow Andrew at all the Channel 5. It's everywhere. Channel 5 is everywhere. It's amazing. Thank you so much, Andrew. And until next time, that's a wrap.
Appreciate you, bro. Until next time.